It is right on 7 o'clock, so we'll get ready to get started. Or 6 o'clock, goodness. We'll get ready to get started. I just want to double check that Sasha or Mike, all of our panelists who should be elevated are on.
I'm not seeing Jane Warren, Tony.
Jane noted, this is Amy Siebert. Jane noted she was having a little trouble calling in. She's had some internet issues at home, but I think that we can hook someone up to help her in the background. If you want to go ahead, Tony.
Okay. First of all, let me say good evening and welcome. I'm Tony Jones, Greenwich Public Schools Superintendent, and we are delighted to be here tonight for this public hearing for Phase 2 GHS remediation on our fields for the soil. And before I turn it over to Amy Siebert, who's been such a leader on this for us, I just want to say thank you so much to the Town of Greenwich departments who are working in such close collaboration with all of us at Greenwich Public Schools. This is a real team effort, and I think you'll hear that tonight, just in how much coordination has to go into a project of this magnitude. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you, Tony. I'm Amy Siebert, the Commissioner of Public Works, and I too am thanking everyone who's here tonight for this important project. We've got folks here from our technical team, AECOM, our legal counsel, Jane Warren from Carter and English, the Board of Ed, Parks and Recreation. We've all been working together for quite some time now to keep this moving forward. And you're going to hear us talk a lot tonight about how our goal is to have a solution that, you know, protects human health and the environment and gets us all, you know, back to normal work on Greenwich High School. But that overarching thought informs all of our work as we coordinate with the regulators to move these plans forward. Speaking of the regulators, I would also like to thank them. Tonight we have Kim Tiza from the EPA. We have Ray Freegon, I may have even said his name wrong, but from DEP, Peter Hill and Jeff Wilcox, who've been with us for, you know, all of them with us for this process. And we really thank them, the help they've given us and the time they give us to keep this moving forward. And you're going to see their names again. So we're introducing people more than once sometimes here. We're so happy about all of this. We're having this meeting to keep providing information to the public about this project. Attendees may recall we did this last year, a similar meeting. It's part of a process where you can comment, you can ask questions. You know, there's time even after this meeting. If you have to run, you can always go to the Board of Ed website and find the contact information there, all kinds of information there. And tonight at the end here, we'll have time for comments, questions, and also email. So again, if you have to run at the end, there's information there that'll let you get back in touch with us. And I think with that, I think I've said enough. If there's something else, I'll add it at the end. I'm going to turn this over to Patrick Haskell, our lead from AECOM. He's going to share some slides with you. So we'll run you through our Greenwich High School Remedial Action Plan work here. So Patrick, I can see you are clicking away, and here it comes.
There we go. Sorry about that. I had to get myself unmuted and shared. So thanks for being here. You know, as Amy said, this is an opportunity to share with you a little bit of an update on the remediation activities. And we just did submit a remedial action plan to the state and to EPA, Connecticut DEP and EPA, regarding the remaining remediation activities out here, which, you know, focus on the athletic fields in the areas west of the school building. But I'll give you a quick update on the stuff we did in the past year and then dig into the plans with some more depth. We'll, you know, give you a little more introduction. Is going to give Jeff Wilcox from DEP a chance to speak. We'll talk about what we did this past year. We'll talk about the plan that we've put forward, and we'll talk about the schedule that we're we're hoping to meet for that, and then run over some questions and answers with you guys, and actually an opportunity to comment if you have things you'd like to share. So you've heard from Tony and Amy. I am the Connecticut licensed environmental professional directing the investigation here. Kim Tiza has been the representative from EPA here for a while. Jeff Wilcox is the lead project manager for Connecticut DEP. And we have his supervisor and the assistant director of remediation, Peter Hill and Ray Fregon. We've also been fortunate enough to work with Gary Trombley and Amber Trahan through this entire process at the PCB program, and where I probably have others listening in. But Jeff, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Patrick. I tell you what, maybe when you're done with the presentation, just before we get into the public comment section.
That sounds good for me, to me. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. So the work that we were here in January last year talking to you about the first phase of remediation, and that was done in conjunction with the replacement of field 6 and 7, which are the northernmost athletic fields at the school. There are some PCBs that were buried 10 to 12 feet down in this sort of area. This red area marks the extent of fill material that was placed historically, and I'll discuss more of that later. But what we did was we used the construction of the fields as an opportunity to construct an engineered control. And an engineered control is a way of being protective of human health and the environment by putting a barrier to human contact with underlying contaminants, and it is a way of, it gets memorialized with an environmental land use restriction, which is a deed restriction that prevents people from doing construction on the property, for the town from doing construction without DEP approval. And it's a mechanism that keeps us from having to dig a 13-foot deep hole to get a small amount of contamination out. In conjunction with that, we did some excavation of some shallow contamination around the site. One of the areas was a little area of PCBs that was north of the site. So PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls. They're the primary contaminant that we're addressing here. We did this at the end of construction and didn't quite finish it, but we'll be wrapping that up in sort of concurrent to this the phase 2 of remediation. In addition, this past year, we did some excavation of petroleum in the courtyard area down underground surface, some petroleum out by the old snack shack by the football fields, and then some isolated digs. There were some PCBs that we dug out behind the school in order, we were looking to get some clean soil there so landscaping activities could happen. So get a nice, thick layer of soil there that's clean and able to plant stuff. We addressed a small area of arsenic on an island in the south parking lot, and took out some pesticides that are adjacent to the pond that were related to an old home in the area. So that's the activity that we did in the past year. That's a relatively small activity. That was one summer's activity. We have much more work ahead of us here for phase 2. The area west of the schools is sort of the center of the contamination. And so we submitted a plan to the agencies in the beginning of January. They're still reviewing that. 3 weeks in, they've provided some preliminary feedback and are reviewing it and are looking to folks tonight and in the coming month or so to provide feedback to them relative to our plan. So what this remediation does is it deals with the old area of historic fill, and that fill contains the PCBs, it contains petroleum and other contaminants like heavy metals. The material was placed back around 1970 when the school was being constructed, and was discovered when the MESA was being put in 7-8 years ago. And so some remediation had been done previously to stabilize things in addition to what we did last year. And this is sort of the big push to get this situation sort of settled once and for all. That's going to require soil excavation to remove massive contamination, and a cap to prevent stormwater from infiltrating the area where the contamination is the greatest in order to mitigate groundwater contamination. It's a risk-based remediation. So what that means is it's designed to be protective, but it doesn't necessarily meet the default standards. So it's a complicated site. If you have a simple site, you excavate, you meet the default standards, and EPA and DEP set those standards to be protective without having to go through as involved a process as we are here, where the site is more complicated. But what we do is we're going to make sure the top 2 feet of exposed ground surface, the top 1.5 feet below the fields is clean, and we'll be removing some higher concentrations below that as part of that. And then we'll be constructing engineered controls in 3 areas. And I'll detail those a little bit more as we go. So this is the excavation plan. We'll be digging up portions of the fields as we construct the new fields, and we'll be doing some cleanup around them as we install infrastructure associated with the fields. And then we'll do some spot excavation behind the school, along the brook, and then in the baseball field, and just the and right field of the softball field. As you can see in the center of this area, we're digging 4, 5, 6 feet down to get out the air, some of the higher concentrations that can be reached. There is deeper contamination, 12 to 13 feet down. We're not proposing to chase that, similar to what we did at field 6 and 7. We want to make this a practical solution that allows us to address the fields in individual summers, get them dug out, replaced, and not have an open hole that remains there, or have something that carries over multiple summers for a single field or into the school year. And I'll discuss more of that as we go on as to how we're sequencing things and why. So the engineered controls, these are areas where concentrations of contaminants will remain at depth, 2 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet down, below an engineer control. And so the engineer control, it'll essentially include the western parking lot. These lines are a little more complicated than the actual limits will be, but this kind of shows you the areas where there's, just to illustrate the extent of where stuff is buried deeper. So that's an asphalt cap with clean soil underneath it. We'll use a clean soil cap in the grassy areas of the baseball field and the softball field. And then these artificial turf fields will have an impermeable liner under them, as well as clean soil. And that impermeable liner will extend out to the parking lot. So we have a larger area where rainfall is prevented from infiltrating and into the heavier contaminated soil and recontaminating groundwater. So we evaluated a number of alternatives. These are the sort of our 3 representative approaches to cleaning it up. And this is sort of part of the process of doing a risk-based cleanup. You need to explain, why it is you're not cleaning up to default standards. Is your site complicated enough, challenging enough that it really merits considering a risk-based approach rather than using the default remedy? All these remedies are protective of human health. Nobody's going to contact soil that's 2, 6, 10 feet down, because we'll have established engineered controls. But what we looked at was to dig up everything to the default standards. It's 85,000 yards, over 100,000 tons of soil to dig up. To do that in the summers would probably require 10 to 15 or more years, or it would require just an extensive period of time that would overlap with the school year and would cost a lot of money and not necessarily be more protective. We looked at an alternative where we just set a hard number to clean up to. The nature of the fill placement is that there wasn't like there was a spill up top and we could dig down and get the worst of it out and not have stuff down below. There is high contamination down at depth. And so that would involve digging out a lot of soil as well, but would still take a long time because of the depth and cost roughly twice as much as the remedy that we're proposing. And so I've sort of run over that. We're looking at, digging up that top 1.5 to 2 feet around the school, around the fields, removing PCBs greater than 500 in just that in top six feet below the fields, which just gets us down to the water table, and then have that impermeable cap to manage rainwater and prevent anything driving groundwater contamination. So as part of this, there's a lot of infrastructure associated with this. We'll be putting in new ADA compliant bleachers and a ramp. There is, because we're putting in new impermeable surface, we have to have stormwater detention that's going in around the fields. These dark blue lines illustrate that. There will be a lot of piping coming through, piping to just make sure that the old swamp deposits don't off gas and affect the liner. Stormwater will discharge outfalls of the north, center, and south of those fields, and then in groundwater will be passively collected. Groundwater isn't expected to get up to the liner on this, except maybe in the spring during extreme rain events. So we have that'll be routed to some tanks over here, and that just prevents pressure from building up underneath the liner, and causing the system to be affected poorly. And then we received a preliminary comment from the agencies asking us to include a provisional remedy. So we'll put in a piping network for a provisional groundwater recovery network. And so there is groundwater contamination under the fields. It hasn't migrated to the brook. PCBs move. It has been 50 years. PCBs move very slowly. By putting in the liner, we think that'll slow the migration further. But it is, because PCBs move so slowly, it is possible that they haven't made it from the fields to the brook yet, even though it's a short distance. And so by putting this in here, putting this piping in here now, it makes things a lot simpler for if in 25 years time, there were groundwater close to the brook, were found groundwater, and then that would allow an active remediation system to prevent PCBs from discharging into the brook to be installed without having to dig up the fields and go through this all over again. So that's something that we're working on the design now. We don't have the details for that yet, as that was an early comment on the plan, but we're working with EPA and DEP to make this work. So actually I didn't mention it here, but there's a retaining wall that we built along this eastern side of Field 3. This is of the turf fields. This retaining wall is necessary to tie in the liner and make sure we can extend that impermeable layer out to the parking area. And so that that retaining wall is going to be a tiered series of stones up to the fields, and we're working on a planting plan with the town and our these are sort of an example. Put permeable pavers in there and some attractive plants to just sort of help with the view while we have this what's going to be a fairly large wall up against the parking lot. But nothing on the parking lot side will change. This is all just construction into the space toward the fields. So that's just sort of an overview of the plan. It's not, there are technical details. There are a lot of technical details in the remedial action plan. I'll point you to a link for that, and maybe we can get that. That has been put in public notice. The notice for this meeting had that link. It is on the Greenwich Public Schools website with a link to our remedial action plan, and you can see detailed design drawings and rationale for every bit of the remediation. And it's a lot of details there. We can certainly, if anyone's looked at them, we can answer your questions. And there'll be opportunity for comment after this meeting too, as well. So the remedial approach, we developed a schedule that in coordination with the Greenwich Public Schools, Parks and Rec, and DPW, we talked about how can we do this. We're going to be digging around the school for a couple of years, and we'll be replacing the fields, and how do we do this with a minimal disruption to the school while protecting everybody's health and safety. And so to avoid having, the nature of remediation work where you're excavating soil is that trucks are coming and going all day long for day after day. And that That just doesn't coincide with schoolwork. There'd be nowhere to, there'd be nowhere to park. There would be traffic issues. So we do the excavation work in the summer. We do the field restoration work. The idea is to do the, like putting in the liner, for example, or putting in building the new fields happens in the fall. So deliveries, don't happen as often as soil moves during excavation. So that can be managed in coordination around regular school activities. We have our staging in part of the fields that are not being used. And the goal is each year to get the field restored in time for the spring season. But in the fall season, we sort of will have mixed use. Now I'm going to go into this a little more detail here. So in summer of this year, we're hoping to be out there and starting on the northern most of the artificial, or the northern field 4. We'll do our excavation as I showed you in that earlier figure, and then we'll backfill it during the summer. And over the summer, we need to give our contractor a lot of space. The western parking area will be closed. School won't have a full summer program, but there'll be access to the school property for teachers and whatnot down at the southern parking lot coming in the other side. And I don't know the details of how they'll manage that, but I'm sure Tony will be letting everyone know as that activity approaches. The fields will be closed in the summer just because of the busyness of the activity. We just don't want people bringing in, dropping their kids off at sports camp or something that's not going to work well with the remediation. When it's this scale, last summer there was, we were working up in the northern part, there were some activities down. There were more activities on the school, but we can't due to the size of the scope of this work. We're not going to be able to do that. So come fall, the school year, we'll have gotten out of the parking area. We'll just be taking the outfield part of field 5 that's beyond the outfield fence. So the softball field, when we're restoring and reconstructing the athletic field here, there will still be availability of all the other fields to use. Part of the southern artificial turf field, some of that will be fenced off because we have to construct a solid edge on the fields as we put them in, and there's going to be drainage that runs in between the fields. So some of this field will be lost for the fall semester, which will leave, it'll work for gym classes. You won't have regulation fields for that fall semester. The goal is to have this constructed by spring though, and then have full use of the fields for the springtime. This outfield area, the staging area, and a row of parking are likely to be taken up for the entirety of the school year. Although, that's our expectation at this point. Will be the following summer again, a large area being taken up, doing some work behind the Mesa and on field 3 here. This is when we'll be starting starting to get the liner in here in that summer. We will, so the fields will all be closed down again for that summer. And in the fall, we'll have stolen a layer of parking for construction of the retaining wall. And you'll be missing one field for the fall and winter. And then this other field will be partially accessible, although kids will have to take a jog around the work area to get there. And that's so those next 2 years, and then summer 2023 would be the 3rd year of construction. Again, we've marked off the parking area. We expect that this will be a smaller scale activity. We're planning on blocking off the parking and giving the contractor who comes in the maximum room to be able to operate. What'll happen during the summer is when we're excavating, the trucks will be coming in off hillside, turning around and heading back out and loading with soil and then leaving on a regular basis. And within that, they're going to need to stage their construction equipment and soil to backfill things. And eventually those areas get turned over to field construction activities. But in the summer of 2023, we think this will be a smaller activity. It's possible that we'll be able to free up some fields. We'll know more after we've after we've worked with the contractor, gone through a couple summers, see how everything works. And we're definitely, one of the goals here is to get everybody use the fields and of the school facilities as soon as possible and be out of your way. So, life can return to normal over here. But in this last summer, it'll be primarily doing some work on the baseball field and some other areas on the southern side of this, and do whatever follow-up work we need to do at that point in time. But we expect to sod this in the summer and early fall and be out of here and not carry, everything will be well established by 2024. It is an aggressive schedule. There's a lot of soil to move, and there's a lot of utilities to construct and so forth. But we think it's doable, and we're really looking forward to getting to work and building in some good fields and making this a good, safe remedy out here. So that is sort of the quick overview. We're gonna have an opportunity for questions and answers, and obviously that is a quick overview. Going into the details, I could talk about this for hours, and maybe I will before we're all said and done here tonight. But there are two ways to comment. You could use the raise your hand feature, and we'll take a verbal comment or a question. I'll answer it, or I'll hand it off to Amy or Tony or one of the regulators to provide an answer as you're called upon. There's a Q&A, there's a question and answer function, a Q&A feature at the top or the bottom of your screen that you can type something in, and perhaps you've done that already. If you provide your name, someone will read that out and we'll try to answer that. Obviously, there's a lot, you may not know what all your questions are now. There is a public comment period that runs through February. And the plan and a lot of historical documents are on the Board of Education website at this, and maybe we can. So this is so you can find it through the Greenwich Schools website, and there is a public information flyer, the newsletter that came out recently that has a link to that, and then written comments. DEP solicits written comments during these public notice periods. Jeff Wilcox will be taking those. You can write to him or email him. And Jeff, do you want to say something about the public comment process and how people can participate in this?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak briefly about this, a little bit of a background and a little bit of I guess, a look ahead. Because the school property is in one of the voluntary remediation programs in Connecticut, and because the proposed use of an engineered control, the remedial action plan needs to be public noticed, which it was. The proposed engineered control needs to be public noticed, which it was. The town provided public notice through the required methods of the signpost in front of the building, mailing notice to abutting property owners, and notice in the paper. And during this period, which ends at the end of February, I think it actually extends because of the weekend to March 1st. I think that
Yes,
that's actually 11 p.m., 59 minutes and 59 seconds of March 1st. But between now and then, there's an opportunity for the public to provide comments both tonight and later through written methods. Tonight, this meeting is part of that public notice and outreach process. The town scheduled this so that people could have this opportunity to ask questions, submit comments. Like Patrick said, you can continue to provide comments afterwards in the written form to me at the address that appeared before. Email would be preferred these days. You can certainly write a letter if you would like to me. We'll get you an address on that. That's also on the other page. Tonight, DEP, we're here to listen to the comments and the questions that people have. We kind of see this as a conversation between the town proposing the action and the public, and what their interests and concerns are. We're here to answer questions, but really the questions on the proposed plan really are answered by the town. We can answer some questions on some of the process aspects of it and some of the requirements. So tonight, if you have a question, please, please ask. If you have a comment, please submit it. Again, you can write to me at the address you see on the page currently. Jeffrey Wilcox, CTDEP, 79 Elm Street, Hartford, Connecticut, 06106. You could also email me at jeff.wilcox, WILCOX, @ct.gov. Those who provide written comments will, in the end, get a chance to see what the responses to those comments were. So let me jump a little bit ahead on that. At the close of the public comment period, we will compile all the comments we've received, the comments we received tonight. If the town receives some, DEP receives some. I've already received a few. And DEP will ask the town to provide a response to all the comments that have been received. We will review the responses that the town provides, and if they're adequate, fine. If we have additional questions or want some additional discussion on some issues, we can ask for that. And as part of DEP's review of the remedial action plan and the engineered control, we will take into consideration of the comments that have been received and responses to those. So I would urge you again, if you have some comments or questions tonight, please submit them. And going forward until March 1st at 11:59:59, you can submit written comments to me through email or through the mail. Email is certainly much easier these days, but either way works fine. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to let Amy direct hand it back to her to manage this. But we do appreciate your input. This is your school property. It is both the town is doing the remediation, and is the town for whom the remediation is being done. So it's an opportunity for the members of the townspeople to provide their input, and we definitely value what you guys have to say. So with that, I'm going to take down the share. I can go back to it at any point in time and just let folks talk. Amy?
Okay, so I'm going to work here with the wonderful help of Sasha Houlihan from the Board of Ed on this to make sure we do this the right way. I think we're trying to take the folks, you can comment by raising your hand, and there's also that write-in Q&A. So there are some raised hands here, and with the help of the Board of Ed, we are going to go through you one by one. So it looks like the first individual is Terry Lamontia on the list I have here. And Sasha, can you help me let this person speak their piece?
Ms.
Hello.
Lamantia, you should be able to speak.
Good evening, Dr. Jones, Town of Greenwich leadership and guests. My name is Terry Lamantia, and Stephanie Cowie and I are the Greenwich High School PTA co-presidents. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening about the GHS field remediation project, and thank you for the thoughtful presentation on this important matter. The safety and soundness and use of our fields are essential to our student athletes. While we are not the technical experts regarding the proposed remediation strategy or the risks associated with it, We are in full support of a safe and speedy resolution of this issue. As our school and our students need the use of these fields, we hope that Greenwich High School can move forward with the plan to remediate the fields as quickly as possible to minimize student disruption in the fall. We look forward to the completion of this project for the safety of our students, as well as the other community members who utilize the Greenwich High School fields. Thank you for your support of our students.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you for being nice that I said your last name wrong, so thank you. And the next person on the list here is Joe Kelly.
Joe, you can go ahead. Mr. Kelly, if you could unmute yourself, you'll be able to speak.
Oh, here I am. Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Joe Kelly. And Patrick, may I first say what a riveting presentation. Thank you very much for that. It was fantastic. I've seen it before, and every time it's exciting. Thank you. I come to you tonight as a parent of 4 children. 3 are out of the high school. 1 is still there. I am a former head coach at the Greenwich High School as well. And also, I am an elected official on the Board of Education. I want to speak in favor of this project. The field 6 and 7 were such a great success. I can't see any reason at all not to continue with this remediation program. I am 100% in support of this. I can't see not doing it. It'd be silly not to do it. So let's go forward with it. And thank you for your for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. The next person on the list is Peter Bernstein.
Hi, thank you, everyone. I'm Peter Bernstein. I'm actually the Board of Education Chair, as well as the father of a current GHS sophomore, and I've got another one arriving at the high school next year, and we've used those fields for years. I want to thank DEEP, the EPA, and AECOM for their continued dialogue and partnership. None of us can do it alone. But this is the right plan to ensure the safety of our students and our community who regularly use our fields. From our Pee Wee football and youth soccer to our varsity sports, lacrosse, men's and women's soccer, football, rugby, you name it, we've got it. Baseball, don't want to leave them out. The fields are constantly in use on weekends and throughout the spring and summer and fall, and we want to make sure we can keep them up and running. So we want to ensure that this work is done in the most expeditious manner, and as such, I ask that you please allow us to move forward with this project immediately following this school year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. The next individual on the list is David Langhorn.
Hello.
We can hear you, Mr. Langhorn. Go ahead.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies, and a set of assorted guests. I have a couple of pertinent questions. The first is, did anybody consider that once you close that baseball field for 4 years, there's no other fields to be used except Havermeyer and one other? I'm not understanding what somebody was thinking, that we will close all the fields because we can't get our act together to fix Western Middle School, which has been now closed for 4 years. You guys blow an awful lot of nonsense about getting the field fixed in a year. You talk an awful lot of nonsense about digging 13 feet down where the child's going to eat the PCBs and die. We haven't had many of those as of yet at Greenwich High School. We haven't had any that I know of at Western Middle School. I don't understand why we can't get it together. I don't understand when you guys put a plan together, you didn't come up with something to perhaps put on fields 6 and 7, maybe a baseball diamond in the artificial surface, so at least the varsity has a field they can play on. They can't play Havermeyer because nobody does anything, because God forbid it's not a shared park. They can't go to Western because it's closed because somebody found PCBs 10 feet down in 4 different spots. My one child that's in Greenwich High School graduates this year. My daughter just graduated from Western, is now at the high school. My youngest son just got to Western. None of them have played on those fields. You close the baseball field down, you close field 3 and field 4. Where are these kids going to go? Nobody seems to be having a plan that is other than fix this, make a boatload of money over 4 years, and we don't see a baseball field till 2025 because you guys can't organize your trucks. I'm thinking it should be a little bit easier than that. I'm 100% in support of this project, but somebody needs to say, wait a second, fix the other field simultaneously year one, keep the baseball field open at Greenwich High School so that you have that field. By the time you finish Western Middle School, you can dig up the high school field all you want. And the thought you're putting this girls' softball field right back to how it was before, waterlogged and drenched, so the girls only use it 20, maybe 50% of the time. The high school stays dirt, and that gets used 50% of the time because you're not going to put an impermeable cover on it. You're going to leave dirt and grass, which is going to flood as it always has, and will continue to do so in the future. You got to turf the whole lot. Otherwise, we're not going to have any fields.
So, Mr.
On that
Langhorn,
note, I'm 100% in support of everything you guys do. Do I think it's obviously a little nuts? Yes, I do, but that's just my problem. But someone at some point's got to think about the impact on these children.
thank
And
you, Mr.
unfortunately, the
Langhorn.
impact has not been very thoughtful towards them, particularly in the other fields. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you are successful with this project, and we need to get it done right now.
Thank you, Mr. Langhorn. We appreciate your comments. I think we can bring a little bit of clarity there that the baseball field is not out of service for 4 solid years. So we have another question that's asking us to be a bit more specific about which fields are available at which time. We've been saying that in the summertime, we need the site to work. But during the school year, that baseball field should be available. So, and we do understand, we've heard from many in the athletic community about their concerns about even not having fields during the summer. So we're working with Parks and Rec and with the Board of Ed to do the best we can. So, but we thank you for your comments. The next individual here is Leslie Moriarty.
Okay, I believe I'm unmuted now. I'm Leslie Moriarty. I am a past member of the Board of Education and was on the building committee for the MESA project, which originally found the problems that we have at the site. I'm currently on the Board of Estimate and Taxation. However, tonight I'm speaking as an individual. My children did go through the high school. I think having fields that have been remediated are really important for all the children and for the neighbors of the high school. I fully support the project that's being proposed and the risk-based approach that is being proposed. And I want to thank DEP and the EPA for working so well with the town all these years. I know it took us a while to get to this point. You're hearing some frustration from our residents about the need to have access to these fields. So I'm hoping that we will be able to move forward with this project expeditiously. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty. The next individual with the raised hand is Elizabeth Dempsey.
Hi, everybody. Elizabeth Dempsey, 21 Hillside Road, directly across from the glass doors of the high school. I just have to say, reflecting on what's happened so far in this hearing, as well as public hearings I've been to before, the last one being Central Middle, where, of course, we had to have a hearing about the phase 1. A couple comments. One, thank you all. I understand it's been a great partnership between the town, DEEP and ACOM, and you guys all have done a lot of work. And as someone who's highly concerned about the toxins across the street from my house, you know, I know you put a lot into what is a difficult design, and it's great to hear about it because it gives confidence. I will say it's a little upsetting that every single person who speaks about this, including representatives of the BOE and the public, honestly, it's all about sports fields in this town. I'm a member of the Sustainability Committee and an environmental advocate. And, and yet one has to be reasonable that, we're not going to scoop every single bit of these toxins out. But honestly, I just really have to ask anyone who's listening, all you care about is how fast you get a playfield back. I, for one, am a stakeholder and a taxpayer and would like to see that ACOM and the town do things in the right way and in a quality way. So I just wish people would kind of take a top view of this and the speed, putting pressure on you to turn around so their kids can get on course with another soccer team. And I'm a parent of 2 athletes. Can we just get this done right? This is big stuff, people. It could have been a super fun site if the town hadn't been able to fund the remediation. So this is not just about sports. And my 2 kids played NCAA sports. So we are no shrinking violets when it comes to the importance of sports in student lives. So here are my questions. One, to what extent are these toxins friable, or what kind of issues do we have with dust control? I'm concerned by being across the street with a large stretch of property, just that, of course, you're going to tell me that you're going to cover the trucks and that everything will be done, but and I know PCBs are heavy molecules, but could you let us know what you can do for dust control so dust doesn't drift across and contaminate my soil as it's going to be happening all summer long? And secondly, and I could take this under at a separate time, but many of us on the Sustainability Committee and Greenscapes and the Tree Conservancy have discussed a willingness to talk to the town about putting up landscaping so that GHS doesn't look so barren in front. And I know that there's a lot of intersecting issues, but there is aspects of urban forestry and benefits to putting in trees. And it's a project that many of us have talked about providing private funding for, should the school be willing. And could I ask Mr. Haskell if he could point out at some point now or in another meeting where in the front, which does not have a lot of contaminants, we could potentially put in free trees should the Board of Ed be okay with it? If I could follow up with you on that. And then the last question was, what kind of materials does one put in for an impermeable layer? And the question, I guess the real question is, what is the lifespan of that layer that goes under the big fields? Does it break down the way, say, tar and other types of barriers can be?
Okay, so 3 questions. I guess we'll start with dust. So dust control is an important part of any large remediation project. And it's particularly so when you have contaminants that attach to the dust. There aren't vapors coming off. What you have, though, are particles to which chemicals attach. And if the way that people get exposed is via dust. So dust control by making sure the soil that's excavated doesn't dry out, making sure the trucks are covered, and then dust monitoring. We do a risk assessment for any one of these projects where we're handling large amounts of dust, evaluate the concentrations that we are digging up and use a sort of a worst case scenario. So not monitoring for nuisance dust, but actually monitoring the dust to ensure that the levels don't reach a level that any contaminants could become a hazard. So we'll be doing real-time monitoring, downwind of our excavation and at strategic locations on the site when the work is happening. That's a critical part of that. And then of course just general site housekeeping to make sure that dust isn't being tracked from point A to point B. We're trying to live load trucks, leave the trucks on the asphalt, and have the soil be the contaminated soil be handled. Have other vehicles managed in the areas where the contaminated soil is. In terms of planting, the front of the school is generally, the soil management challenges there are fairly well. I think we're in a pretty good state for that. We're not planning remediation in those areas. We don't need to. We're not having environmentally isolated soils in that area, or no provisions for having there's no contaminated soil at depth either. I think there are some logistical issues that need to be worked out with the school and the town, that I think that we've been talking about and trying to come up with suitable planning plans. But I'll let Amy answer that in a little more detail if she has more information on that. And then your third question was about, sorry, Amy?
Lifespan of the line.
The lifespan of the liner. So the liners last for pretty much ever. It is a welded geomembrane, and so it's like an HDPE membrane. It has a good thickness, and it's installed in such a way that it's embedded between there's a soft layer under it and cushions above it to prevent it from being upset. And that's part of the reason that I was showing like gas control layers. There's not much gas going, but you don't want it to bubble up. And just by keeping it stationary, draining the water off of it, preventing water and gases from building up under it, it lasts for pretty much forever. Obviously, technologies are new here, but we're looking at something that's going to last, it's going to last as long as anything out there is plastic, and it'll be protected. And 100 years, it doesn't have an anticipated expiration date. Let's put it that way. Amy, you want to talk about the landscaping a little more to answer that question?
I do. I'll be happy to throw a little bit in there, and we know that that's very important. So last fall, we once again pulled together the landscape architect that had looked at the site with us a few years ago, and we went around the site with Dr. Kramer. I don't know, folks hopefully have met Dr. Kramer, the superintendent of parks, who is quite a plants person. So he assisted us with other parks folks and the Board of Ed in looking at what could we do and what could we do where. So we went around the entire site. You saw some pictures of planting beds on the back of the school, but we looked at the front of the school. We were unable to get to some tree planting last fall because of the drought and because of some capacity issues with just getting landscapers available to help us with that. We're hoping that we can get to some of this spring. We have quite a town process for this. We need to talk to folks in the neighborhood, and that's on my squarely on my to-do list. But it's also something where we first wanted to make sure with the Board of Ed that the designs met their security concerns, that we're meeting, the operational needs, security concerns. We're going to be reaching out to folks in the neighborhood. We also need to talk to the Architectural Review Committee. And ideally, we can get this all done in time to get some trees planted out there on the street. And of course, making sure that we're okay through the voluntary remediation program, that we're okay with our regulators with what we're doing out there as well. And that's what Patrick was alluding to. So hopefully, we know it's been a long time coming, but we hope there's hope on the horizon. We would like to, when this is all done, see the site as a whole looking, a bit renewed and spruced up and so forth. So hang in there, and we're happy to hear people are interested in figuring out how to help fund it even. That can be quite a challenge. Okay, so I'm looking over here at our list. The next person who's raised their hand is Diana Delano. Oh, and while she's being allowed to speak, sorry, Ms. Delano, one of the things I wanted to remark, Patrick, you were talking about dust control and all. We have done remediation already at the site in past seasons and successfully made sure that we kept everything well under control. So hopefully that might make folks feel, a little bit better that we have done that in other summers. So we would certainly continue to do that. All right, Ms. Delano.
Hi, Diana Delano. I live on Old Church Road, but my property is I sit directly on field 6 and 7 and actually around the corner. I'm not sure I guess that's field 5. So I think it's great that you all are moving ahead with this finally. I do have a few questions. First of all, I am wondering, last summer, the remediation, which looks fabulous, was meant to start a month later than it did. I actually had 2 weddings planned, and like the rest of the world, had to reschedule them. But I did have a big party planned, and all of a sudden the fields, I guess because of the COVID, you started the project early, and but by a month or 2 months. And I'm just wondering if you, this time around, could be very thoughtful in terms of notifying the neighbors when the work is going to proceed, and also perhaps not start at 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and maybe, you know, do it during reasonable times, and perhaps not all weekend long. And my second question is, how are you going to protect us, the neighbors? Most of us, I sit actually right on the fields, but most of the neighbors sit above. And as you know, dust rises, you know, all this stuff rises. Are you going to, I mean, should we be wearing hazmat suits? I mean, what are we going to do to protect ourselves and our property and our children and our pets while this is going on? And my third question is this remediation going to replace exactly what was there, minus the bad soil? And when you're laying all these pipes and all these new things, there will be no lights, there will be no sound systems, there will be, because there is, you know, there are regulations in place for what kind of usage these fields can have. And we just want to make sure the neighborhood that we're not going to be dealing with lights and, you know, lit scoreboards and sound, you know, that what we get back is what, you know, we expect. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay,
So I'll jump in, Patrick, quick and throw it over to you this time. So a couple of things, we can certainly do our best to get you a little better notice. I think the project, the field contractor last year did try to take advantage of the school shutdown, but we'll do our best to make sure we have that information out to you. And we do not have any plans to put back anything, like we're well aware that lighting and things of that nature are not approved. So we're putting back what we have. We're making it better in the sense that we're providing accessible bleachers for Field 3. There are bleachers there now, but they're not don't meet accessibility standards. But that's the kind of thing that'll go back in there. And again, Patrick can speak to it more fully, but we have done remediation at the site in past years. And again, through the dust monitoring and all the other good practices that are put in place to manage these materials as they're removed and taken away, that's always very much a concern that nothing's going off site. So Patrick, if you want to elaborate on that again.
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of run through some of the dust control measures before. I mean, the most important thing is that when for dust, because that can get up in the air when the wind blows, and you know, when we do try to keep that lightly moistened. You don't want to make it so wet that you have runoff, but you got to keep it. We keep the exposed soil wet, and you know, part of that will be managed by trying not to have, you know, contaminated soil exposed for very long, to get whatever samples we have to have and close it up, and then doing that sort of maintenance to make sure that that conditions for dust generation aren't present in those excavations. It may be dry everywhere else, but our contractor will have a water truck there at all times to keep things under control, or at least a water tote, something, pickup truck with a water tote that they can hose things down and make sure that we're not getting dust generation up to your properties. We haven't developed the dust monitoring plan for this yet. Typically we do that downhill. We certainly are willing to work with you to sort of give you some sense of confidence. So if the wind is blowing to the north off a field 4 when we're digging, we could look at, we'll certainly be doing perimeter monitoring between that field and your property. And we're happy to work with the folks in the neighborhood for that. I think it probably would be helpful to get a written comment from you for that. Just just an email to state your concerns, so that we have good contact information for you. Because really, the people who are concerned about these health and safety issues, we want to have effective communications so that, hey, your contractor was there at 5:30 in the morning starting up their engines, and we want to make sure that that's not happening. We're not planning to show up at 5:30. We do anticipate that to get the work done in the summers, there will be weekend work. We haven't figured out the extent of that and the hours, but we will certainly make that information known to everybody as we work with our contractor to understand, really understand what it's going to take to get stuff to move. But we certainly want to work reasonable hours and don't want a dump truck banging away, being your alarm clock every morning.
We typically limit the work hours to those that are the approved town work hours. If we have to go outside of them, people are aware they do require a variance for that. I think everybody knows we're really up against it with the summer recess, but we certainly understand the neighborhood and we do understand your concerns. The other thing, we were just sort of recalling some things that in the past we've had live monitoring for dust control with stations to confirm that we've had control. So Patrick was alluding to that is part of the whole plan around how this work actually gets done. So lots to do but many things to keep it in place. And of course, the regulators don't want us letting anything off the site either. So.
If I could add to that, Amy.
Yes, please.
Yes. So the monitors are real time, and if the monitors do pick up a situation that would indicate that there's potential for excess dust, that is known very quickly, and the construction team can make appropriate changes either in the operations or applying additional water to keep the work area wetted.
Exactly. All right.
Yep.
If we're in good shape, I will go on to the next individual here, Kathleen Stowe.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for holding this. And I should say that I am vice chair of the Board of Education, but I come here tonight as a mom, a taxpayer, and actually a Parks and Recreation coach. I think this is a really important work for the town. I'd like to see these fields obviously completed as quickly as possible. But I really just wanted to note how much I appreciate that the schools and the town are working together here as a team to ensure the health and the environment are protected. And most importantly, thank you to DEEP and the EPA for helping us reach hopefully a safe and speedy resolution. So it's really just a comment. I'm pretty well versed on this topic, but thank you again for your time tonight.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stowe. The next person on the list is Karen Fasiliotis.
Ms. Fasiliotis, if you unmute, you'll be able to speak.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Sorry about that. Just a quick question on the ongoing monitoring after the site is cleaned up. What is going to be required by the town? And do we have a cost estimate? I'm Karen Fasiliotis, by the way. I'm on the BET Finance Board, but I am speaking as an individual. I'm just curious as to what the responsibilities will be of the town going forward once the site is cleaned up.
Okay, so we have prepared a monitoring and maintenance plan as part of the remedial action plan. It essentially involves monitoring the groundwater around the fields to just sort of verify that the plume is stable, the contaminated groundwater isn't migrating, because there is contaminated groundwater where the soil is. We anticipate that will remain, and the main thing under the fields, isolated under the fields, but we monitor it to make sure that it doesn't migrate toward the brook. There's obviously maintenance requirements and so forth. That will inspect it in the spring and make sure that the pavement and the parking lot isn't developing cracks that could expose soil. Make sure that the fields aren't deteriorating, settling in a way that might endanger the integrity of the liner and those sort of activities. And so that typically that monitoring gets done, in the spring after the freeze thaw cycle, but take a look basically before every season, from both the playability standpoint, but also from a durability standpoint. So the costs for that are, they are incorporated in the estimates that we've been providing the town. There is a long-term monitoring component anytime that you have an engineer control and leave a area of contamination in place to ensure that because that monitoring is to ensure that the remedy remains protective. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head for the monitoring relative to the overall cost. That is in the remedial action plan, however.
All right, and I'm sure we can dig that out.
Yeah, we are recording this, so questions that I answer here will get a more formal response. We'll in a written response, so we'll be able to provide a more detailed answer for the record when come March.
So, and I know, Ms. Vasiliotis, you said you were wearing your resident hat, but as a BET member, I'm sure you and other members of the BET will be asking that question as well. So we'll have to pull that all out so that we have that ready. So the next person lined up here is Ashley Cole.
Hello, good evening, everybody. How are you doing? I would like to say a nice hello to Jeff Wilcox, who's always been incredibly helpful and answers my questions in a timely manner, sometimes 2 or 3 times, because I forget and it's complicated stuff. But Jeff has always been a terrific source for us as residents. And I have another question as a neighbor. Naturally, we would like to see the entire site completely cleaned up. I understand that's not possible because of, is it possible or is it just financially impossible? And once the cleanup that we're getting on on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the bare minimum that'll get us through the state and 5 being complete cleanup, what type of cleanup are we getting?
Okay, well, I'm gonna answer this, but I'm gonna also ask Jeff to chime in at some point. The plan is new to him, but I think he can explain to you the process that they go through in evaluating this. So the cleanup is, the cleanup it's not impossible to clean this up. The problem is that to dig everything up would shut the school down for an extended period of time, years. It would either be many summers, one after the other, where fields are closed for years on end, and it would be difficult to coordinate how you would dig part of a field one year to depth, part of it the next year, and then the next year, or you would shut the school down for a few years and do the job. On industrial sites, that's the way it gets done. A job like this, we might do in 3 years on an abandoned industrial site. This is not an abandoned site. This is a site that is full, that gets a lot of use. It gets a lot of use during the school year, and it gets a lot of use during the summers, and we're interfering with that latter bit. And so it's a balancing act between those things. The important thing is that it's protective. And there are contaminants at depth there. Those contaminants at depth will continue to affect groundwater quality. The groundwater quality that's in contact with it. It's been there for 50 years. That groundwater really hasn't gone anywhere in that 50 years. So we think that by isolating it under this barrier, we provide a remedy that's fully protective. And so 1 to 5 is it's not a scale that you think of. I think what you see is that we're digging up, a fraction of, if we dug everything up, it'd be like 85,000 yards dug up. We're looking at digging up about about 30,000 yards, and some of that material is not that contaminated and would actually be used under the field. So under this plan, so we're disposing of the most contaminated stuff that's accessible from ground surface without turning this into a much larger project. And that probably amounts to disposing of a quarter of the stuff we would if we dug it all out on a so that's not a 1 to 5 scale, but it's a protective remedy, and I think it's a remedy that allows the town to utilize its facilities, and there's some nice facilities, and I think that's an important consideration there. Jeff, do you want to chime in on how, because you're the ones who are going to be evaluating this and asking, can you also do this? What about that as time goes on?
Yep, we got the wrap a few weeks ago. Just getting into it now, frankly. What we're going to do is evaluate, is the proposed remedy. It will protect human health and the environment. Yes, all the material at the property could be removed, but it probably not necessary to protect human health and the environment. The key thing from a human exposure is contact with the soil and potential contact with groundwater. The soil will be either remediated within the first few feet to a residential criteria or some alternative criteria, which the department would approve. Where there's artificial turf, the plan is to essentially cap that with a fairly thick, it's hard to do it justice, but it's much thicker than you would think a plastic sheet would be. It's tough to rip. It's tough to get through. Yes, a determined person absolutely could get through it, but that'll be on top of the polluted material which remains. Then there'll be, I don't know because I don't know all the details, but it's 18 inches or 2 feet or something along those lines of material that comprises the actual field construction. The field has various drainage layers and stone layers and shock absorbing layers. So you get I don't remember exactly what the proposal is. I can't really speak specifically, but there will be a number of feet of clean material, soil, stone, artificial turf above the polluted layer. So, in those areas, a person would have to dig through the field, dig through all the layers, dig through the liner to get at the polluted soil underneath. Now, could it happen? Yeah, sure. Will it happen? I wouldn't think so. I would assume the maintenance people at the school would spot that sort of activity, right, and put a stop to it. And also many of these exposure scenarios are based on many years of exposure day after day, so that's not terribly realistic. As long as it's maintained going forward, that'll be the thing. There'll be a maintenance plan. There'll be required monitoring, including the maintenance of the field on field 6 and 7. That was designed that way. The artificial turf is replaceable, but beneath that layer, there's some layer you can't dig beneath, and it protects protects exposure to the soil beneath it. And then in terms of the groundwater, no one is drinking the groundwater in the area, so that's not a potential risk pathway. As I recall, groundwater discharging to West Brothers Brook, meets the surface water criteria prior to leaving. So in that sense, it's in compliance currently. As part of the remedial plan, there will be a removal of a fair amount of polluted soil. The agencies may require more, maybe not, I don't know, to address the most impacted soil there, and that'll have an effect on protecting groundwater by removing material that's directly impacting groundwater today. Also, when parts of the field are covered with the engineering control, rainwater can no longer get through the soil and move the pollution from beneath the fields through groundwater movement out to the edges. In the areas where they're going to remain turf, grass, natural grass, fields 3 and 5, 2 and 5. The different set of criteria apply. The top 2 to 4 feet, depending on exactly what we're doing in various locations, will need to be compliant with the residential criteria. So in the end, and it's not like Patrick said on a 1 to 5 scale. You can certainly look at the costs on the 1 to 5 scale, but it's really is the proposed remedy going to be protective, and looking at the risk if the remedy fails. So, if the turf field is not maintained, just to say, it's still the process of having to get down through all the layers and through the capping and all the rest of it is an issue. That's really more of an issue, I would say, on a property that might be abandoned at some point in the future. It's a public high school, and I don't foresee that in the foreseeable future. The town is, I assume, as long as the town is an actual viable entity, this will be maintained. And that's what we expect, and that's what the various land use restrictions and the maintenance and monitoring plan will require going forward. After all is done, there will still be a requirement to not allow certain activities at the site, to digging in particular, that sort of soil disturbance, and also monitoring of groundwater in particular, and monitoring of that everything that was set in place to protect people from the soil maintains itself.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, one other thing I would add about the construction. So under the artificial turf field, that's about 1.5 feet thick layer on top of the impermeable layer, and then it's 2 feet or more on the other fields. One thing we did in designing this was to ensure that the engineer control, that the soil that can't be disturbed starts some depth underground, so that you can go back here and do field maintenance. If the turf on the baseball field, the grass in the baseball field is damaged, you can peel that back, replace it, no problem. If you're a sprinkler line that bursts, you can dig that out, because it's in the top surface of the soil, and that can be replaced. And when the fields, the artificial turf fields, reach the end of their useful life in 15 years or so, 10 or 15 years or whatever it is, those surface materials can be replaced, and all that can happen as normal maintenance. Obviously, if a sewer line were to burst in an area of engineer control, the nature of the environmental land use restriction is that we would need to get an emergency release from Connecticut DEP, because those land use restrictions are DEP's interest in the property. They become the owner of that interest and would have to grant an allowance for that kind of maintenance work to be performed. So that's the nature of the controls, and why the formal engineer control process is implemented the way it is, because it just allows a process that makes it very clear what you can do, what you can't do, so the town maintenance people have sort of clear guidance. And we've been working with DPW on developing clear guidance for folks doing projects on the school property, so that can be incorporated into people's planning. And obviously, as the remediation proceeds, that becomes a simpler process. Thanks.
All right. With that, the next individual with the hand raised is Burke Dempsey.
Yeah.
Mr. Dempsey, if you unmute yourself, you'll be able to speak.
Okay. Hi, I'm following up. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Mr. Dempsey, if you are unmuted, you can speak.
Okay. He did leave a question in the Q&A that we can, so we
just
can
going
get to
to
that
say-
later, but go ahead, Amy. You can run the show.
Patrick, you and I are saying the same thing. We saw Mr. Dempsey has a question. If it's appropriate, what we can do, I see one more person with their hand raised, and we can ask Mr. Dempsey's question on his behalf and address the questions in there. So let us see if Ms. Fasiliotis, Karen Fasiliotis, is the last individual I see here with a hand raised. If we can recognize Karen Fasiliotis again, thank you.
Ms. Fasiliotis, if you unmute yourself, you'll be able to speak.
I'm sorry, my hand was up from before. I didn't put it
Oh,
down.
okay.
No problem.
No
Very good.
worries. I have had that same thing. We've all had that experience. Thank you. I see that Ms. Cole, Ashley Cole, has raised her hand again. Ms. Cole.
Hi, I didn't get to finish. I was going to also ask, are there any other high schools in America with this kind of remediation situation?
I don't know high schools across America. It's a lot. That's a large data set. You know, I mean, I'm not working on it. I don't specialize in schools. I don't know if what other schools have cleanup issues. Kim or
Ray,
Amy, you got something?
Ray,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ray.
Good question. I would say that we do have many other school properties, at least within Connecticut, that have a variety of contamination issues. So this is not totally unheard of. And to address one of the earlier comments that I think that you may have had, Ms. Cole, was I think it was you that had asked the question of the scale of 1 to 5. And generally speaking, the remedy should fit the risk that is posed by the pollution. Can you spend more money? Absolutely. Are you going to get any additional protection to human health or the environment? No, provided that material is environmentally isolated, which is what that membrane liner that Patrick Haskell is talking about would actually do in this particular situation. And even earlier this evening, one commenter had asked about the longevity of this type of material, which is called a flexible membrane liner. And again, this material is quite durable. Approximately 20 to 25 years ago, I was involved with a closure of a landfill in Connecticut. And one of the questions that I had was kind of along the same lines. What is the longevity of this material? And should it be exposed to sunlight? Could this material, like other plastics, degrade? From that one question, I took a swatch of the membrane material, and I've had it in my backyard covering a firewood pile for the last 20 years. It has not aged a day. Amazing stuff.
Kim, did you want to add anything? I saw you unmuted.
Thank you. Yes, I did want to just follow up on the question about other schools that may have had a similar fix, if you will. And there are at least 2 schools in Mass that I know I've worked on. One did complete a remedy by excavation. PCBs did remain in place. There were metal contamination as well, and the field was covered. And it seemed to be a very good success, at least today. They are using it as a soccer field, so it's worked really nicely. The other one we're working on now, that's also in Massachusetts. It's a large recreational field. They're looking again at, I believe, artificial turf on that. And again, like this one, the area is so big that in order to excavate all the contamination, you are balancing to some degree the risk, the cost. And as Ray said, you really have to, balance those to determine what the best approach is. You can't dig out and in this instance, as Patrick was talking, 85,000 cubic yards just to maybe get most of it out, you have to understand how many truckloads of material you're talking going up and down the road, probably for years, to try to get that done. And it doesn't always make sense where you can manage risk in place safely, understanding that there are long-term encumbrances that have to be implemented from now to into perpetuity, such as the maintenance and monitoring of your clean covers. That's not only when you monitor it, if there's a flaw in it, you have to repair it. That's part of the long-term O&M plan and requirements. And for monitoring of groundwater, and as Patrick said, the agencies are looking at having a contingency that goes into play now rather than later. So we account for if something goes awry, it can be implemented quicker rather than later. So I just wanted to put that out there.
All right, thank you, everyone. The next person with their hand up on the list here is Ms. Elizabeth Dempsey. Again, Ms. Dempsey.
Great. Hi, sorry to ask a follow-up question, but as we're kind of absorbing all this. So my questions are about water coming down and water coming up. As you know, one of the unique aspects of this site is that it was built on a swamp, or what oftentimes was a pond that you could actually put a little sailboat on. We have pictures of it. And it was a beautiful, huge pond, and skating pond, in fact. You'd be stunned to see it. And so the site has a long history of swampy, of water coming up and having to move bleachers from one part of the facility to the other. So I had questions about water and climate change. We all know we have stronger storms, we have higher winds, we have days of rain, and you've talked about this this impervious surface coming down, so that could hopefully shuck off all the water. Are you concerned at all? Question one, are you concerned at all about, that's a huge amount, that's two playing fields is a lot of water to shuck off. And do you have any reservations about that? And then also, is there any concern about seepage that then brings water up from the base, the groundwater supply? Would be my second question.
Okay, so we did a detailed stormwater design and a stormwater study to evaluate just water in the whole watershed to develop that stormwater. While I've been focusing on figuring out what we need to do as a corrective remedy, our engineers have been figuring out how to manage the stormwater and make sure that there's adequate detention for what falls, so that it doesn't produce great slugs into the brook. It moderates the discharge and prevents just large inputs of water that could affect flooding conditions. That's a requirement of the town regulations and federal regulations. We're not particularly concerned about water coming up. We've been monitoring the water continuously for the past 3 years. The water levels around those fields, they do get, there are areas where they get up near ground surface temporarily, not directly under the fields, but on low-lying areas near them. And so there is ponding that is from storm. That's from water that gets on, that falls and isn't shunted away. I think having the stormwater detention in there will help with that. And having less rainwater get into the ground will help with, keeping groundwater down. I think when you see it flooding, that's not really water coming up so much as that's rainwater that just has nowhere to drain. The fields are the brook that surrounds the fields is encased in a concrete culvert, and that limits the amount of drainage that can happen in that area. And as a result, it sort of reinforces the old, like that wetland is in a bedrock bowl, and that concrete culvert is just sort of is another form of that. And so that's why water, that's part of the reason that you see flooding in there is just, there's not a lot of freeboard for water that rains to drain out. And it doesn't, having that barrier and having a groundwater and stormwater management systems in there should help that. So it should be better going forward.
Right, Patrick, doesn't the engineer control for fields 3 and 4 also include a system to capture groundwater should it rise that close to the surface?
Yeah, it's
and groundwater and collect it in tanks.
Correct. Yes. So yeah, there is underneath directly underneath the impermeable liner is a honeycomb drainage blanket that will collect collect any water that gets up near the field. So it's a sloped field, so it's mostly at the edge of the fields. So any water that does get up there in like the spring following a rainstorm, that would be passively drained to tanks that would be where water would be collected and brought off site for treatment and disposal, proper treatment and disposal. Obviously, if water levels were to come up, like due to, get higher and those tanks were to fill up more often than the data that we have would anticipate, then we would have, we'd probably switch over and have a system that manages it on site and discharge it to the sewer rather than the approach that we have now. But based on our 3 years of water monitoring and our, which obviously isn't 100 years, isn't a 50-year data set, and the fact that water levels only reach the elevation of those fields one or two times at one or two locations over the course of that period of time. And when I say one or two times, I mean for a couple hours. We don't anticipate water levels to be a major issue for this.
All right. With that, the next individual with their hand up is Ralph Mayo.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me time to speak tonight. I appreciate it. My job is currently I'm the principal of Greenwich High School. It is a great place to work and to learn. And I just want to give my perspective or point of view on this project. Number one, my primary concern is always the safety of our students. That's number one, number two, number three, number four, number five on my list, student safety. I've been working with our consultants, with DPW, with Parks and Rec, and I've learned a lot more about this type of project than I ever thought I would learn in my life. And I think we have all the bases covered. We are collaborating very well with one another, and our communication has been excellent. I think one of the speakers, one of our neighbors brought up the fact that our communication wasn't that great when we completed 6 and 7. I think that's an area that we'll need to improve upon and make sure that that doesn't happen again. We want everyone to know what we're doing, how we're doing it, and you'll obviously know why we're doing it so that we can get these fields in place, not just for the students of Greenwich High School, but for the children of Greenwich who, as I can tell you, as I work all summer, those fields are full all summer, and they're not our students. Those are our potential students, but those are younger individuals that have come to use the fields for different types of sports in the summertime. So we need those fields. So hopefully we can get this project going and make sure that, again, that it's safe to play there and that we maintain those fields for many, many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. The next person with their hand up is Mr. David Langhorn.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my follow-up question. Ms. Dempsey raised an extremely interesting issue, which was there's floods, the rains are heavier, the storms are bigger, the winds are stronger. If you look at field 2, which is the baseball field, and the softball field, both of which are sod at the moment, there is an opportunity that if you dig 2 or 3 feet up from the baseball field or the softball field and put your impermeable screen in there, any reason why, since the baseball field particularly is below the level of fields 3 and 4, that we wouldn't put turf on the top of it and cap it that way, so you guys wouldn't have to dig quite so deep if we put the cover right on the top of it and have it as a turf field. It seems to me that the turf gives us an extra barrier of safety for the children. gives an extra opportunity for the rain to go off the top of the field. So instead of it being lower than the impermeable wall to the creek, it would be a much better situation for the children to play under. And Mrs. Dempsey is exactly right. We have under no illusions that the weather is not going to continue to get progressively worse if you believe the science. And obviously we, at this point, we've pretty much put that to bed. I feel like if you put turf on it, you'll cap it. You won't have to take so much dirt away. And that would seem to make a lot more sense than putting sod back down again and all the maintenance that goes with it and the water catchment systems that you'll have to put on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Perhaps that's a slightly less expensive alternative than continuing to just have that field lower than every other field in the place. Your thoughts on that would be much appreciated. And thank you for your time. And I won't bug you anymore.
Thanks. Well, on that, so I can't answer the questions about how the town is going to build its fields and plan that piece out because I'm focused on the remediation. What I can tell you is that what we're trying to do is keep everything as simple as possible so that we're not adding additional construction projects while we're undergoing remediation. If we establish an engineered control that is under field 2, while we might need to coordinate with DEP, there's nothing to prevent the town from deciding in 5 years' time that, hey, we want our baseball field to be an artificial turf field too, and build it up higher. As long as that barrier remains in place, it remains protective. And then when the work is done, soil is managed correctly. But that's just simply not part of the plan at this time. And we've definitely heard comments about, from people in the community about wouldn't it make sense to do that? And it's a question that I haven't. It's just, I guess it's not my department, I should say. My job is to make the site clean. Amy, do you want to
right.
chime in?
What we because we had questions about some of that, and what Patrick's describing is certainly what we're doing does not preclude something like that being considered in the future. But what we found was that doing it now, it wasn't needed to drive the remediation work we need to do, and that it was difficult given the grades, and it didn't give us any cost savings to make that field artificial turf at this time. So particularly at that field 2. So again, it doesn't mean that someday in future, if that turns out to be a desired project through Board of Ed and Parks and Rec, the folks who are the real users of the field. But we'll at least have it ready to go, I guess maybe is one way of saying it, for when we're there. And we thank you for those comments. And we too also think about what's happening with the weather. I'm glad to hear there are people who are thinking about that, and hopefully not just for Greenwich High School, but for the town as a whole. I see here that we have Mr. Glenny, who's raised his hand and would be next. And Mr. Glenny, we saw a question from you about how to access this when it's over. And that was, we did answer that. You'll be able to see this recording, or anyone who would like to see the recording will be able to see it through the link on the Greenwich High School soil remediation page. So thank you for asking that, and it will be made available through that page. So we can put you all to sleep again.
Great. I have one other question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Great. I represent a property on Old Church Road. Can you tell me a little bit more about the soil sampling that was done on the creek? And was it, are those levels accessible? Can we see those? We back up to the creek, so we're just kind of curious as to what kind of testing, how far and how much was done in that area.
Okay. So obviously on the fields, there was, I guess I didn't show you the sampling figure for the site. The fields have an enormous amount of sampling data for them. The creek has less. We did perform a sampling program of surface water and sediment and submit an ecological risk assessment to Connecticut DEP some time ago. Those ecological risk assessments take longer to review. We did not see contamination above above the levels in the creek are much lower than they are in the fields. There was I don't want to quote it because I haven't looked at the data in a long time for that because it has been under review. But essentially, the creek levels, because it is washed out fairly well by stormwater, the creek is quite there's not much contamination in the creek itself. There were some detections in the pond. I can't quote numbers to you, but Cider Mill Pond is something that we'll discuss, and there may be more work in the surface water bodies in the future, but we need to get our feedback from DEP on the ecological risk assessment for that. But the levels there was no levels that would trigger any human health concerns in the creek.
And all our reports we've been posting all our reports at the Board of Ed webpage. So there's a ton of information on there that people can still go to that page and find prior reports and prior information. And Sasha Houlihan with the Board of Ed has been great about helping people get access to those reports. She can reach out to any of us if there's something that is specifically being looked for, but that some of those ecological risk assessments, tons of sample data in there for in the range of reports. We have oodles and oodles and oodles, so we can. But I would think, Patrick, we would direct them to the ecological risk assessment, right? Our screening tool.
That is where the data, the most up to date. So there's an ecological risk assessment, and then there's an addendum, which was done for for downstream areas a few years ago. The original ecological risk assessment is older, and one of the comments the DEP issued was to let's get a longer look at the whole ecosystem so we can evaluate it as a whole. Jeff, I see that you had unmuted yourself and might want to chime in, so please.
No, right. Those two reports are still in review, and the ecological risk assessments are done by another group at DEP. And you're right, they do tend to take a little bit longer because there's a limited number of people to review them, and there's a fairly good number of them to look at. My recollection, and I don't want to really be quoted on this because I haven't looked at it in a while myself, is that the culverted portion of the brook, really there isn't much in the way of sediment. It's concrete. There was some amount of sediment, but not much. There was some surface water sampling done in it, at least for the risk assessment, maybe a little bit more. There were some contaminants identified in Cider Mill Brook, Cider Mill Pond. I don't remember exactly, but it's probably, some pesticides. There's probably some PCBs. There's probably some petroleum products, that sort of thing. In them, that's my general recollection, but beyond that, I just don't remember the particulars. But that continues under review, and depending on what that review determines, will either I don't know, maybe some additional action, maybe some remediation, maybe it's okay. I just don't know.
Yeah, the way those processes go with the ecological risk assessment, because that's much more complicated, because you're looking not just at, is this going to affect your human health? The answer in the brook is there was nothing that would affect your human health. But when you start worrying about, this midge fly and this food chain, it becomes much more complicated. And so oftentimes you get a response from asking for specific data in specific areas. So there could be more investigation of the pond, say, for ecological issues, but the brook, relative to being a neighbor of the brook, it's pretty well, the contamination in the fields is well contained.
Yeah, and there's only sediment. It's hard to describe without a map, but after it loops around field 2 and then makes another loop to the south again, that's about where you get sediment, is where the concrete channeling stops.
Right, and most of the sediment that is in the concrete channel has washed it in from upstream or from off the cliff, off the hillside above it. So it tended to be cleaner. Jeff, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that, or someone else at DEP? I saw a couple of you show your faces, Ray and Pete. No? Okay, very good. All right, Amy.
All right, we have another person with a raised hand. The name on the screen is Cardinal. If when you come on, you could tell us your name, please, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Amy, I think that's me, Gus Lindeen. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. I'm the Director of Athletics at Greenwich High School, and I'd like to thank you for all your efforts in helping making our field safe for all our athletes. We're very fortunate to have multiple athletic fields on campus. The replacement of Cardinal Stadium Field and the North Fields, Field 6 and 7 this past summer, have provided our high school and community with much needed improvements. While we know this next project will cause some disruption to our athletic seasons, we understand how important it is, and we will make all necessary adjustments to our schedules to allow for a successful completion. This has been a long process, and I'm confident we would all agree it will be a much welcome improvement for our town. I thank you, and our kids thank you for continuing to make their safety a priority. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Gus. And we thank Gus, because when we show him drawings and scenarios that take fields out of service for a while, we're thankful that he doesn't just keel over with, it's all his good physical activity that keeps him from keeling over with a heart attack as we show the impacts that we're going to have out there. But we hope we'll get out of this here sooner rather than later. All right, if I don't see more hands up, so we can swap over at this point. We do have some questions in the chat. So I see I can read out these questions, and then we can do our best to try to answer them. We have two that were answered already. Just to be very quick, we had Mr. Tom Kazazone, if I said that right, sorry if I didn't, who was asking about the proposed schedules to clarify which fields are going to be open versus closed during the different seasons. And we discussed that in the presentation, but also in addition, we have provided that information to Parks and Recreation in a separate document to try to be real clear about, summertime, we need the whole site. What are we going to see in the fall and the spring? And we can try to work to make that nice and clear, and maybe make a smaller package of that we can post on the website, because we do know that's important. And we are working closely with Parks on that. We had another person.
And if you do want us to go back through that part of the presentation, I can pull that up again. So, raise your hand or type it in and say, yeah, show me that, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, and I think it's there's the next question was about the meeting being recorded, and we do have the link to the Greenwich Schools website on there. So let me swap back to the open questions. And so we have a question from Leslie Moriarty that says, given the amount of remediation work expected during the next few summers, what would be the recommendation for working on other exterior capital projects at Greenwich High School in terms of worker safety and overlapping locations? Specifically, there is a proposed project to reposition the tennis courts and connect a road from Putnam Avenue to the west parking lot. What would be your recommendation for the timing of this project? So I'll take a quick stab at it, and I'm happy to have, Patrick and our AECom folks join in. I'll do my best here. But yes, complicated. Can we do projects at the same time with other things? We can. We managed to accommodate cooling tower work that was needed, and we worked together to help Dan Watson and his team from facilities get that done. There's other work going on at Cardinal Stadium where, again, we're trying to make sure we know about it as the technical team that's been working the most with the regulators through the voluntary remedial program here, to make sure that they know what's going on and we're doing everything the right way, and so forth. I think Repositioning the tennis courts, that's over towards the Cardinal Stadium area. That's an area where we didn't see that historic area of poor fill, which makes that a less complicated area to work in. And of course, it's kind of across the water. You can get to it from Route 1. You have some options. The access road from Route 1 and into the western parking lot is certainly a lot more complicated. We have talked to the team that's trying to look at that and explain to them. We've shared data with them. We've explained to them that, you know, we're in the VRP, where, you know, we have these soil concerns. We have to see what it is that's actually being proposed and what they need, so that we could determine how it would affect us. And I don't know whether, Leslie, that answers your question specifically enough yet. You're welcome to raise your hand again if you want to chat with us about it. But that's something that we've been asking that team to let us know, you know, just because putting a new bridge in across the Brothers Brook, soil contamination or not, comes with its own considerations regarding its elevation and where it is with respect to FEMA flood elevations and everything else. How is it going to affect parking lot operations? And, you know, then we can manage around the contamination issues and so forth. So certainly it makes things complicated, but we're going to have to see when, if we have the site closed and we have more soil going in and out and we can manage it. Those are the things we'd be talking to them about how would we manage the traffic? How would we manage the site?
Right. And so they did talk to us about, the team did talk to us about this. They said that this is roughly where we would have the bridge come across the brook. And so when they were doing some geotechnical exploration, we went out there and helped them manage the soil, and we collected some samples just so we would know what was up. They don't have a design. They don't have it fully, you know, there's not enough for us to really sink our teeth into, but we did check and incorporate the data into the plan. But absent a design, we can't make that a remedial action plan. But if it were to happen in conjunction with this, and we were able to get an amendment in and just show, hey, this is where the soil is coming out. It's not something that needs to come out, but we're going to manage the soil this way and get EPA and DEP's buy-in. There are some advantages to doing it when there's a team on site that handles contaminated soil. It makes it easier on the project. If it were to happen in 2025 instead, after this project's done, then they would still have to manage the project. There would be less battling for space in there. But we'll, as soon as we have information and commitment that, surety that that's going to move forward in a design, we'll work with them and provide information to the agency so that they can help us coordinate that activity. Where we sampled wasn't where that footing for the bridge would be, or the abutment for the bridge would be, wasn't terribly contaminated, but you have to design it. You don't know how big it is. The bigger that gets, the closer it gets into other contamination. So there's a lot more, we need more information to evaluate that. But in terms of moving the tennis courts and doing work at the stadium, that part of the site is, aside from a few more regulations applying to the management of the soil, because it is in the voluntary program, that is much like any other construction site where you have mostly clean soil, but not entirely clean soil. You need to test and manage your soil appropriately. So.
All right, I am going to take this one question here that's quick, and I think then we can move to someone who's got a question and their hand raised, so we can hopefully do a double whammy. So let me do this question quickly here. Michael Mason asks, what restrictions will be on the fields and property when the project is complete? That's the first part of his question. And Patrick, you talked about the environmental land use restriction. So you discussed that, as did Jeff in some detail. And it says, can other amenities be added, e.g. lighting? So I think what we've explained is we're not adding any amenities at this point, but what if in the future there was actually an approval and a desire to add lighting, what we would need to do would be to look at where it was going, what would be entailed, and then to look at our land use restriction and to determine what kind of permission and work we would need to do with regulatory agencies to put in that kind of infrastructure. So what does that mean? If you're digging a big hole in the ground to put in a footing for a light pole, you're digging down to a certain depth, you would want to make sure you're handling the material that you were taking out of that location appropriately and doing everything in accordance with all the kinds of practices that have been discussed here tonight. You know, I think DEP, you've always been very clear to us and EPA that it doesn't mean you can't do anything on the site. It's that we do it following the proper protocols and procedures and notifications. And that's really important. And I will allow any of you folks, if you want to add to that, or do we think that covered that question?
Yeah, Amy, that essentially covers it. Even if there's a land use restriction, it doesn't necessarily prohibit adding lights or a sign or something. You would have to do exactly what you said, look at what the restriction requires and get permission to do whatever activity you want to do, to manage the soil properly, to restore it when you're done, record the, make sure the new land use restriction reflects the conditions of the site, that sort of thing. It's procedural in many respects, but the important thing is if you do penetrate beneath that liner, you do manage everything properly and button it back up properly when you're done.
Right. And so with that, I see that Tara Restieri, and apologize if I've, mangled your name. You have a question for us, and here you are. So you're ready to speak to us.
Hey there. I wasn't sure about I had submitted a question earlier into Q&A and I was not sure because I hadn't heard it read, if I needed to raise my hand to do it. So this will kill two birds with one stone. So obviously I'm a resident, live on Old Church Road, abutting Field 4 and 5. I'm very supportive of the work in regards to remediation. My question is specific to real estate disclosures that may be required. So my question is, do the different alternatives, the three that were discussed for remediation, have different environmental real estate disclosure requirements when the adjacent owners to the high school property go to either sell their homes or for whatever reason to include in their deed? Meaning, is the selected alternative 3 going to be enough for adjacent owners at the time that the remediation is complete to disclose a clean environmental report, or is that something that's going to be needed or necessary to disclose for an extended period of time? And I don't know, so I would appreciate if you could help me with that one.
All right, so Jane, I think we queued you up to help us answer these
Questions like this.
And I see that Ray is also ready to help us. So Jane, why don't you go first and then we'll.
Absolutely. So Jane Warren with McCarter and English. I'm an environmental attorney that's been working along with this team for the past decade. There were a couple of questions about this in the Q&A. There's two different forms. There's an environmental disclosure form when you sell your own home. And that deals, I've actually got that form in front of me, that deals with issues on your own property. What's on your property? What are you aware of? What do you need to tell your buyer? There was another question that had been raised about a Fannie Mae form in terms that applies to the sale of a multifamily property, getting bank financing in a multifamily situation that said, do we need to disclose the condition, not with respect to our own property, but with respect to the school property next door? And that question asks if you are aware of any industrial use of the adjoining property. Are you aware of a gas station, a landfill, a treatment storage or disposal facility? This is a high school. It's not any of those properties. And so to loop it's not any of those uses. So to loop back to your question, with the different alternatives that were reviewed for remediation, none of the alternatives will require disclosure when you are selling your home. The environmental land use restriction will apply only to the high school property. It won't apply to any off-site properties. There is no contamination off-site that needs to be disclosed at the time of sale of any properties adjoining the site. Does that answer your question, Sasha?
Ray, was there anything you wanted to add into that?
I would only add to Jane's response that to the extent that a party reviews deep records or does an evaluation to determine if there is a contaminated property in a certain proximity, should the school property come up in that search, post remedy installation, it would be identified in our databases as a resolved, completed site.
All right. With that, we have another person with their hand up here, Julie O and Y. So if you'd like to tell us your name when you come up, thank you.
Sure. My name is Julie O. Yabara, and I've been a resident of Greenwich, off but mostly on, since 1983. As the mother of 3 student athletes in the Greenwich Public Schools and the Greenwich High School, actually, I would like to voice my full support for the remediations of fields 3 and 4 to replicate the safety, beauty, and functionality of fields 6 and 7. My children play field hockey, soccer, and lacrosse on fields 3 and 4, and their improved safety and healthiness is of great importance to me. Thank you for supporting the Field 3 and 4 project. And I also want to thank you for the stadium renovations. Having a stadium that equals the stature of our great town would be a welcome fix to the Greenwich Public Schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments tonight. And we have a hand raised again, Ms. Diana Delano.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you. This meeting has been so well done, and you've given us so much information. I wanted to specifically address Mr. Mason and his question regarding lights and any future plans. I'd like to remind you that the turf fields were built in 2005, and Diane Fox was head of P&Z back then, but there are very strict stipulations regarding the fields and their usage and what is and not allowed. And lights are not allowed. The agreement stipulates that, there are a lot of things that the high school is not abided by, but specifically lights are not part of the package. And this is something that is of great concern to the neighbors. And just to remind you that this is smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And so I'm hoping, Mr. Mason, that, you keep that in mind. And I'm sure, I know a lot of people are concerned about fields and enough fields and usage, whatever, but I just want that to be, if you go on file 2005, the planning and zoning approvals stipulate that when these fields were built. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. We have another, I'm trying to, my head's going back and forth between the Q&A and the hands raised here. We have another question from, and Ashley Cole has her hand up. So Ashley Cole, they'll put you on there. And if your question is the same one as in your chat, that would be helpful. So we'll know if we can close out that Q&A question.
Yes, I wrote the question down. You can just erase that. I didn't see it, when I looked on, it wasn't there. My question is, we have a new administration and they're committed to the environment. Are you concerned about new environmental regulations that might be coming up before this is finished?
I'm going to let the agencies speak to their end, but I mean, we're not on our end. We're not concerned about that, and part of that is approvals get written based on the existing regulations, and these regulations have been in place for a very long time, with the PCB regulation particularly without changing. And I think DEP is working to update their regulations, and their those have a lot of different effects. But we're not, we've been keeping abreast of those and don't anticipate anything. Ray, would you like to say something about the changes in Connecticut regulations or regulations in general?
Sure, Patrick. I would add that the remediation standard regulations, these are the regulations that govern cleanup throughout Connecticut, actually have gone through an amendment phase, and that's just very recently been approved by the legislature. And in a matter of days, that will be the law of the land, as well as the environmental land use restrictions have been also overhauled. And in large part, these amendments facilitate cleanup, not hinder cleanup. Again, facilitating is the name of the game with these amendments.
Yeah, I'd like to just add something too. These regulations facilitate cleanup while protecting human health and the environment and holding it paramount. The changes in terms of the EUR regulations and the remediation standard regulations are not really going to result in a change to remediation, but maybe a few more requirements here or there that are basically already incorporated in the plans that we're reviewing for the most part. The EUR regs are going to affect the environmental land use restriction that's recorded. In some cases, there'll be some new types of restrictions that will be included in the new regulations that are not currently included in the old regulations. Things like, monitoring maintenance of the engineer control. We didn't have a mechanism to require that before, but we can require that now. Also, groundwater monitoring. That's going to be part of the EUR now. We couldn't require that before, but we can now. So the things that are new are all consistent with the approach that's being taken out there at the site, and really result in no change to remediation.
All right. Well, hopefully that has addressed that question. We had one last note in the Q&A. It is a comment we can share. Claire Kilgallen wrote a note saying, "Not a question. Thank you for all the time and effort put into this plan. Given the length of time it's been already, I look forward to the part of the plan moving forward with all deliberate speed." And thank you. We're doing our best as well. We know this. I've joked with people that I'd be delighted to finish this project, and we will when it's done. But we all do. I hope you all do know that we do care about doing this the right way. We do care about having something that is protective of human health and the environment, that's long lasting, that is environmentally sound, and still gets everybody out there playing all their sports as best as we can. And we really thank, I thank everyone and all these regulators and everyone sitting here this evening, all our technical team. I know, as we alluded to, there are people behind the scenes from DEP and AECom and Parks and Board of Ed all listening in and supporting this. So, and we thank all of you residents and other elected officials on the call as well for helping us. And we certainly lastly thank the IT team at the Board of Ed who've made it easy to hold this meeting. I don't see any other questions and no more raised hands. So that means I get the fun of hitting the leave button and ending this meeting. Oh, we've got a thank you comment. Okay, but we can close the meeting. And again, it's available on the town's website, on that Board of Ed website. So, we'll put you to sleep another night. We can all go home for dinner now. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Right.